There's nothing quite like sculpting something from scratch. But you'll need a good grasp of the tools to avoid coming unstuck. So let's get down to it. Maybe Cuthbert will learn something too. Before starting this tutorial, I'd recommend you complete Start Dreaming for motion controllers if you haven't already. It'll get you up to speed with all the basic controls, so you can focus on becoming a sculpting master. First, make sure that you're sitting comfortably in front of your PlayStation camera. Now hold the Start button for a few seconds to calibrate your imps. Next, hold the T button on your secondary motion controller to open the assembly menu. Use your primary imp, the one with the face, to open the modes menu with X. Then select Sculpt mode. Its icon is some three-dimensional shapes. Release the secondary T button to close the menu. Every time you enter Sculpt mode from the modes menu, a new sculpture will be created. You'll also notice that when you're in Sculpt mode, everything outside the sculpture will be blurred and grayed out. You can adjust visual feedback in your preferences, which you can find in the options menu. Before we start sculpting, use the move buttons to reposition your view so you can see the first two platforms and the whole gap between them. Now you need to set your imp reach. If you stretch your arm out in front of you, you'll see your imp doesn't reach the platforms. Setting your imp reach to the platforms will put them within reach of your arms. Hover your imps on either side of the first platform, the one with Connie on it. Tap both move buttons at the same time to set your imp reach. Now you can reach the platforms with your imp. Setting your imp reach is vital for sculpting. Set it to something large and you'll be able to sculpt huge shapes in the scene. Set it to something small and you can work on tiny details. Once you're in position and have set your imp reach to the first platform, you're ready to start the next step. When you first enter Sculpt mode, the Smear Shape tool will be equipped to your imp. The Smear Shape tool is great for sculpting organic structures, so we should probably pick an appropriate shape. Hold the secondary T button to open the Shapes menu, then select a shape with your primary imp. To resize the shape, hold the secondary Circle button. While holding the Circle button, tilt or twist your secondary controller in either direction to resize up or down. Release the Circle button to stop resizing. Now position your primary imp next to the platform, on one side of the gap. Hold down the primary T button and use your imp to smear shapes into the gap and create an organic structure. You can undo and redo using a gesture on your primary controller. Point or twist the primary controller to the left, then press its square button to undo. To redo, point or twist your primary controller to the right, then press its square button. Or you can undo and redo using the buttons in the Tools menu. Each time you press and hold the primary T button, you'll create a new edit within your sculpture. Bear in mind that all the edits you make are part of a single sculpture, even if they aren't connected. This means that in assembly mode, they'll behave like a single object. Why not try out different shapes to see what works best? Maybe try making something like a rock formation or a tree trunk. If the video ever gets in the way of your sculpting, remember, you can grab and move it with the primary T button. When you want to try out your sculpture, Switch to play mode and walk Connie around on it. Once you're happy to move on, go back to edit mode, rewind time in the assembly menu, and proceed to the next step. What happens when we want to edit an existing sculpture rather than start a new one? Let's investigate. When we went into play mode, we were taken out of sculpt mode. Now you're in assembly mode, so to edit your existing sculpture, you'll need to scope back into it. Scoping into a sculpture is exactly like scoping into a group. Hover over it with your primary imp. Hold the secondary triangle button, then press the primary X button. Scoping into a sculpture automatically puts you into sculpt mode. Now we're here, we can edit the shapes we've made. To grab and move shapes, first press the primary circle button to unequip the smear shape tool. Unequipping any tool automatically equips the move tool to your imp. Try grabbing and moving parts of the sculpture with your primary imp. To clone a part of the sculpture, hold the secondary triangle button. Then grab whatever you want to clone with your primary T button. You can also resize the shapes you grab. Just hold the circle button on the secondary controller, then tilt or twist that controller to resize the shape. If you want to add to your sculpture, just open the Sculpt Tools menu using the secondary T button. Select a shape with your primary imp. This will equip the last sculpt tool you were using. Try sculpting with different shapes. Remember, you can undo and redo at any time. If you accidentally scope out of your sculpture, just hover over it with your primary imp. Then hold the secondary triangle button and press the primary X button to scope back in. In the next step, I'll show you how to color your sculpture. You've probably noticed by now that all your sculptures are orangey brown, like clay. That's the default color, but you can sculpt with any color you like. If you're in assembly mode, scope back into your sculpture. Hold the secondary triangle button and press the primary X button. Open the sculpt menu by holding the secondary T button. In the sculpt menu, use your primary imp to open the colors section. Select a color group to reveal more shades. Now choose a shade. And as if by magic, the shape on your imp is now the color you chose. Any new shapes you make will be that color, but the old shapes are still brown. Luckily, we can also color shapes after we've created them, using the spray paint tool. Open the sculpt menu and select the tools icon with your primary imp. Then select the spray paint tool, which has a spray can icon. Now your imp will have an outline of the current shape on its tip. Intersect the shape with your sculpture and you'll see the spray paint color appears on it. Hold the primary T button to spray paint the shapes. Use different colors and shapes to completely change the look of your sculpture. There's one very important difference between sculpting with color and using spray paint. Self-colored sculpture edits will keep their color when you move, but if you move a spray-painted edit, the color stays behind. So if you're going to spray paint, it's best to wait until you finish sculpting. You can also change the finish of your sculpture using the Finishes menu. Try out the Coat, Style and Effects tutorial if you want to know more about finishes. Take some time to practice using the smear shape and spray paint tools. Then, when you're ready, proceed to the next step. All these smeared shapes are creating one single sculpture, even if there's space between them. But you can also use the smear tool to remove from the sculpture, instead of adding to it. To do that, we need to set the tool to subtract. Scope into your sculpture if you haven't already, and make sure you have the smear shape tool active. You can equip it in the Sculpt Tools menu. In the Sculpt menu, find the Add or Subtract button. It's next to the Tools button, and the icon is a shape with a plus sign on it. Select this button with your primary imp to make the shape you're using subtractive. You'll notice that your imp turns into an outline. The shape on your imp becomes an outline too. You can now use the smear tool to cut into your sculpture. Try using different shapes to see what effect they have. For a really cool effect, try subtracting with a different colored shape on your imp. How good is that? You can switch the tool between Add and Subtract using in the Sculpt menu. But if you're like me, you probably do it. Touch the glowing sphere to the bottom of the handle on your primary controller. Easy as that. Touch it again to switch back. Experiment with the tools for a bit and make something that looks interesting. When you're happy with its shape, go into play mode and see if you can get Connie across it. When Connie has crossed the first gap in play mode, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. Move your view over to the next gap using the move buttons, then start the next step once you're in position. Smearing shapes can be a messy business. Sometimes you just want to create neat sculptures. Luckily, there are ways to do that.